All right, so we're in the last lecture of the Enlightenment. We're going to be going over the outcomes and impact. I'm going to start off in just giving you the overview. So, as I introduced the Enlightenment, we saw the scientific revolution really influence and shape how the Enlightenment thinkers would see the world. And so, this is kind of a good lecture to think about if you come across an FRQ prompt that will ask you to what extent did the influence of Enlightenment thought upon these areas or whatever, just an evaluation of the impact or kind of the results of the Enlightenment, okay? All right, fair enough. All right, so I'll have this chart for you and you're just going to fill it out, and I'm going to go over just some of the main outcomes of it. So the first is that much of Europe is going to adopt a secular worldview of the universe, and so in the first time in Western history, the Catholic Church, those of religious faith, will not have a strong influence anymore, and this is kind of how and why the Western world sees secularism as part of its heritage, based upon the change in direction of reason and where they put their belief in. Okay. Secondly, we have the establishment of Enlightenment despotism. So in Prussia, Russia, and Austria, and partially France with Napoleon, we will see examples of absolute monarchs, leaders that have complete authority are going to seek out reforms, and from that use those reforms to improve their nation states. Okay. Then we have different revolutions are going to be influenced by the Enlightenment, specifically the American Revolution and the French Revolution. We'll be talking about one new political movement that comes out of it that will influence it specifically. It's just an overview. Of course, we talk about reforms that are going to be coming through Enlightenment, and in various countries in Europe are going to see improvements in education for the most part in every country. However, right, some more than others, and depending upon which social class and whether it's university level or if it's primary school. Okay, and lastly, we have the growth of laissez-faire capitalism, and so this is going to lead Europe and North America to reach their industrial revolution because of this new economic system and being introduced. Okay, all right. So I first want to go over the political developments of the outgrowth of the Enlightenment. This will be very quickly because it's kind of review. It's kind of recapping everything. As we mentioned before, during this time, absolutism was at its peak, and many absolute rulers did come to the conclusion that they want to promote the good of the people, right? They believe that their position is given to them so that they are to improve their nation states and that their citizens actually matter. Now, of course, it depends on who. Of course, peasants and serfs are not going to be gaining the same amount of privileges and reforms in their lifetime. But at the same time, people are not capable of ruling themselves, so they're not going to be adopting a lot of the democratic ideals that the Enlightenment does put out. Okay, so what are they actually reforming? Okay, so there are certain reforms that are going to be rather modest and associated with enlightened despots. Okay, so we have, as examples, more toleration towards religious minorities. Legal codes are more streamlined. They're not so specific to just one people group, right? It's kind of like broadening and codifying new laws. Okay, increased access to education, as I mentioned before. Some are going to be establishing more new universities. Others are providing a greater access to primary education. The reduction or elimination of torture, and also even eliminating possibly the death penalty, capital punishment, depending upon which ruler they are. Okay, so those are the main reforms. The main enlightenment despots that we do recognize are going to be Frederick the Great from Prussia, Catherine the Great from Russia, and Joseph II from Austria. Just a little bit of recap, right? So Frederick the Great identifies himself as the first servant of state. And so as absolute ruler, his approach, and many of these guys, their approach towards these reforms really was because their intention was to increase the power of the state primarily, and through that they're able to introduce reforms that will benefit certain citizens, depending upon who you are. Your bureaucracy in your country will improve as well, being more efficient. However, it's really of their intention to just be recognized for their reforms. I don't want to go into detail too much about each of them because I kind of went over that before in previous lectures. But generally, these are names that you can just drop, and those are the types of reforms. Okay. All right. Cool. All right. So one thing I mentioned was the reason why the American and French revolutions were able to be influenced by the Enlightenment is because of the political philosophy of classical liberalism. Okay. So this is not liberalism. It's kind of the foundation of it. It's called classical liberalism because this is kind of where it all began. So this is we call a political philosophy that was an outgrowth of the Enlightenment. From the Enlightenment, classical liberalism really preached and held beliefs in liberty for the individual and equality before the law. Okay, so liberty, right, personal freedoms of natural rights of the person, and also equality before the law. So no matter of what social class you are, the law should be applied to all. One thing is that classical liberalism does not equal democracy. Okay, so I think we've learned a lot in world history that democracy comes from the Enlightenment. No. Okay, so maybe some ideas of natural rights and some political theories do come from the Enlightenment. Eventually, we have democracy. However, that will not always remain. Okay, so a couple things. Natural rights was the philosophy that the American French revolutions would often use as a term, right? Exactly what Locke was saying, right? Life, liberty, property. Montesquieu's political theory on separation of powers and checks and balances, that would also influence the American Constitution. So many other revolutions, and even in France, in the French Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizen, another document that mentions natural rights of the individual, are really honing in on the values of classical liberalism. Rousseau's idea of the general will, sharing one position together, is going to be seen in the French Revolution as well. And so it's all kind of, planting seeds towards revolution. Are they intending to bring revolution to these countries? No, not really. These thinkers, these philosophers never intended to see to that degree a revolution. However, it will build and it will grow. Okay. All right. So laissez-faire capitalism, introduced by Adam Smith, is also going to be part of what classical liberalism is founded upon. This is as a reminder, right? So government is not going to interfere. The people will do what they want. This is opposing mercantilism, and so with laissez-faire capitalism combined with liberty and equality, it's very much right giving freedoms in however you want to do of the individual, your own choices. Okay, and whether it's freedom of speech, freedom of religion, having reforms in terms of equal treatment before the law, or even equal opportunity in and free competition and trade, as far as in economics, that's all kind of tied together. Okay, so this whole package is still under classical liberalism. And also, lastly, is the belief in progress. It's through reason and education that humans can achieve progress and see happiness in their lifetime. So it's kind of as a review. We're just packaging this as classical liberalism, and this is going to take root and eventually be applied. Okay. All right. Last part is this social impact upon women. So one thing I just want to mention is that we're seeing some developments. Okay, so during the Enlightenment, women's roles in society were still subject to great debate. It wasn't very clear whether or not women are completely equal, right? And very much so, most of the philosophers that made their claims and criticisms, they did not, and I'll say this again, right? They did not advocate equal rights. So most thinkers still believe that males were superior and women were inferior, and that male domination over women was more of a natural and biological, um, God created reasonable difference. And Rousseau himself also acclaimed women to be very skilled and gifted in being domestic wives and mothers, and that they should be in the role of obedience and helpfulness to support their husbands and to take care and nurture their children. Voltaire, on the other hand, did believe that women are very much capable of doing the same as men. Okay, so you kind of have a split between certain thinkers, but we'll just say the majority of men still do not see women on the same playing field. Okay, now how did women shine during Enlightenment is really through the salon movement, and in these salons we just mentioned that many of the brightest minds were gathered in the homes of women, and they discussed major issues of the day. Much of where women are going to see development and changes is in education and certain privileges. Okay, so social privileges as far as marriage and that kind of stuff, not even close to voting yet. One woman that really pushed for education for women was Mary Estelle. She advocated for equal educational opportunities, and she was a famous writer in that way, and some other writers were influenced by her writing and stuff. And then we have the other Mary, which is Mary Wollstonecraft, as the main one that we're all kind of familiar with. English writer. She wrote A Vindication of the Rights of Women in 1792. Also promoted education equality, but also wanted to have some more political equality as well. She is what we call the founder of modern Western feminism. It's kind of debatable between Mary Estelle and Mary Wollstonecraft. But anyways, between the two major names for women, Wollstonecraft did claim in her writing that women are subjugated by man, and it is equally wrong, just as a slave is subjugated by the slave owner. Okay, so she's obviously against slavery in that way, and she feels that women should not be treated in that way. Okay, so women, she said, if they have reason, right, if they have the ability to reason in the same way men do, then they too should be entitled to the same rights of men. So the qualification is that they are also intelligible beings, and because of that, women should be given those opportunities.